This is a mini vermicomposter. Now, vermi means worm, so vermicompost is composting with worms. And basically, you feed a little colony of worms, and they create castings or worm manure. And that worm manure is really great for your garden or your plants. The advantages of a mini vermicomposter are that you can really put it anywhere. So this makes vermicomposting more accessible to people who have very small space. Now, most people who are familiar with vermicomposting systems will be aware that a lot of times we're talking about large bins. There are many companies that make big worm bins. There are a lot of DIY videos on how to make worm bins out of storage containers. I made one a couple of years ago as well. But I don't think that there's a lot out there on mini vermicomposting. And the idea is really the same. You want to have a container where the worms can live and thrive, that will keep the worms in so that they're not in your house, and that will collect the castings for you so that you can use them. But it's also a really great thing if you have children who want to be able to see what's going on with the worms, or if you don't have a garden, you only have some houseplants, but you really want those houseplants to thrive. You want to feed them something that's really nutrient rich and natural and not going to burn their roots. Mini vermicomposting systems are fantastic, and I have spent a lot of this year perfecting how to make one yourself. If you want to know exactly how I made this mini vermicomposter, come back for part 2 where we'll give you the complete step-by-step. But for now, let me show you some of my prototypes and some of the things that I learned along the way. Now, all of these worked, so there's many ways to do this. The simplest kind of vermicomposting system is going to be a single container, and that's true no matter what size it is. You want to have the worms inside, put the food in, and wait for them to make compost. The advantages are that it's so simple, but the disadvantage is that it's harder to maintain the right moisture balance, and it's harder to sort out the castings, which is what you would really like. In here, it very easily can become too wet, and there's no way for the liquid to drain away. So that means that your worms can drown. Like you and I, worms breathe air, and they need to have some amount of moisture to be able to do that. So they can't be in a totally dry environment either. But if it's too wet, they drown. And this is why you'll often see worms on a sidewalk when it's really rainy out, because in the soil it's just too soggy. There are puddles forming, the worms are going to drown if they stay there. So it's better for them to come up on the sidewalk and take their chances with the robins. If you're careful, you can maintain that moisture balance, but then there's still the issue of how do you get the castings out. If you're just going to put the worm castings and food into a bigger compost, then it kind of doesn't matter because the remaining worm food will just compost down as well. You can sort out the worms if you like to. You can freeze the whole thing if you don't want to have worms introduced outside. Many things that you can do. You can also starve the worms that are in a single composting system by just not giving them any additional food for about 2 months. And if you do that, it will be almost entirely castings inside your container, but you won't have very many worms left. So if you're trying to repeat this and do this over and over, it may take you some time to build up your worm colony again, or you may have to purchase more worms. The advantages of a multi-level system like this, where there are different levels, are that you can have a drainage level where excess liquid will fall down and collect so it's not going to drown the worms, and you can have the worms move up as they need more food. Now, you can't use just any kind of worm. It does have to be a specific type of composting worm. There are several options available, but what I'm using is really common. It's called a red wriggler or a red wiggler worm. And these kinds of worms are small, they eat a lot, and they migrate upwards for food. So you start with your worms on the lowest level, and as they eat that food and start to look for more, they're going to move upwards because any new food that you're giving the worms is going to be above them as they move up. Throughout the system, you also are going to need some air holes so that there is some oxygen moving back and forth so that the worms are going to be able to breathe that way as well. And then when you're ready, the lowest level will be where your castings are mainly. You may still have to filter out a little bit of undigested food and some of the worms and just add that to your top layer. But you'll have almost perfectly sorted castings that you can directly apply to your houseplants. Now, in these systems, I experimented with how many air holes were needed. What would happen if I didn't use any air holes? What if I used different levels? What if I had different sizes of drainage collection or no drainage collection underneath? And I came up with this as the best prototype where everything lines up perfectly, where I've had the most success and my worms are thriving the most. So come back for part 2 right here or linked at the end of this video, and I'll show you exactly what we used, what our techniques were to make this mini vermicomposter so that you can make one too. And however your garden grows, keep growing as a gardener.